Good afternoon, everyone. This is Jackie Orr with NASCASP, and I am really pleased to have all of you join us this afternoon for the first of our ACSI Best Practices webinar. So first, I want to let you know that you're all muted on our end at this point, and will remain that way until we get to the questions and answers and discussion part, which will be towards the end of the presentation. And then when we get to that point, we'll unmute you all, and then we'll just remind you to mute yourselves so that there's no background noise. And then I need to bring in my PowerPoint here. Okay, go to here. Here we are. Can everyone see my PowerPoint? Maybe I need to share my screen again.
Oh. Yeah, there you go.
You can now?
Yes.
Okay, beautiful. All right, great. So with that, we got the technical problems out of the way. I am going to turn it over to Bill Bolduc from OCS to open the webinar for us.
Thank you, Jackie. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome all the participants, and thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to participate in this important webinar. This webinar is the first of 5 that will be held this month and next. I want to especially thank NASCAP for the efforts in taking up the opportunity provided by the ACSI survey and putting together the best practices work group and our series. Now I want to especially thank the presenters today, after I give a brief introduction and go over the agenda, I'm going to turn it over to Bill Brand in Iowa, followed by Kathleen Skoglund in South Dakota, and Matt Fitzgerald in Virginia, Katie Sestrin in Wisconsin, and Jackie Orr. Jackie, and then finally Kate Blunt, who needs no further introduction. Let's go to the next slide. So today, the goal of the webinar is to provide some best practice to state CSBG lead agency efforts, develop linkages, and better communicate with local agencies, particularly in regards to linkages and communication. Next slide. Okay, the agenda today. So we're going to review the best practices work group, and be followed by the ACSI and continuous improvement, followed by best practices, state office presentations, and then finally questions and answers. And now I'm going to turn it over to Jackie, I believe.
Yes, great. Thank you very much, Bill. And again, we are very pleased to have you as a part of this webinar. And as Bill mentioned, this is a series of 5 webinars to talk about best practices within the states in each of the areas that were scored by the ACSI. So we are starting today with linkages and communication. So let me tell you a little bit about the work group. So the work group actually started meeting. Our very first call, I believe, was in April or May. So it was in the spring, and it was with the states that scored the highest on the 2015 ACSI. So we got together as a full work group, and what we talked about is that we were going to continue to meet and discuss what each state does that they find that is particularly effective in each of the services scored by the ACSI, so you can see what those areas are, and that the state office administrators were going to share approaches with each other, examples, and strategies that they use that, in their view, resulted in their state receiving high scores from their eligible entities. So you can see on the screen, we have the arrow in the red, meaning that today we're going to focus on linkages and communication. Mentioned the ACSI Best Practices Work Group was comprised of the states that scored in the top 5 in at least one of the areas surveyed. So they did not have to score the top 5 in every area, but if they did in one, then they were part of the work group. So you can see from the information on your slide, each of the states and then the state representative who was on our call. So we have, starting with California and Colorado, Idaho, Illinois, Iowa, Kansas, Minnesota, Nebraska, Nevada, South Dakota, Vermont, Virginia, and also, last but certainly not least, is Wisconsin. As I mentioned, that what we did is when we first met in spring, we met as a full group of all those states, and then what we did from there is we established subgroups. So the subgroups were comprised of the states that scored the highest in each area. So it was those subgroups that met individually via phone call and webinar to meet and to share examples and approaches and strategies with each other. And as they were sharing examples and their approaches, other folks from the whole work group were able to attend if they decided that they wanted to. And from there, what we wanted to do from the beginning is we said, well, we really want to share all the, whoops, I'm sorry. Did you just lose my, here we go, sorry. Then we said from the very beginning that we wanted to share, of course, all of the approaches and the examples that were shared in the small work group with everyone in the state offices throughout the network. So the first thing we did is we did have a session at the NASCAS conference in September that actually focused on these two areas, linkages and communication. But since everybody was not able to get to the conference, we definitely wanted to have a session with the entire work group. Okay. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Kay Blunt, who's going to focus in on the ACSI and particularly linkages and communications.
Thank you. My first slide. I'm going to go over the ACSI information fairly quickly because I know most people have pretty much absorbed this. But I did want to give you some information just to put it in a context. And the first context is that is using the ACSI both on the federal and the state level to foster continuous improvement throughout the network. I mean, the goal is to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of all of us who are working to help low-income communities and individuals. Efficiency and effectiveness is important, as is and they are embedded in the federal accountability and the state accountability measures. So see that the ACSI, as you know, is linked to the state accountability measures, but the goal is measure in order to improve our operations. So continuous improvement always involves first you measure, you get customer feedback, then you make the changes, and then you measure again. ACSI really is important only to get a score. The score is the least important, but it helps us know what's the impact. What is it that our customers, in the case of the states, the eligible entities, what do they find most important? What is it that's going to help them do a better job? And the ACSI gives us impact, so it helps us focus our resources and our time and gives us something consistent across the network. And in terms of measuring again, we're anticipating that the next survey won't happen until 2019, which gives all the states a chance to make the improvements that they need to make so they continue to drive those improvements. Next. So what's good is that from 2015 to 2017, we've seen significant improvement across the board but particularly in terms of the Customer Satisfaction Index. Obviously, many states took the ACSI very seriously and took continuous improvement seriously. 14 states showed significant improvement in their CSI scores, and those scores drove the national score up 6 points. And it shows that all of the drivers, which we'll see in the next slide, went up. Next slide. Jan, we are there, next slide.
Yep, on my screen.
I'm on mine.
What about panelists?
That's in the satisfaction model?
Yeah, that's all I'm seeing too.
If you don't want to see the satisfaction model, then the next one is
on the satisfaction model where we've seen a 6-point increase. Decrease in all the drugs in 14 states. So I want the model 12.
and then on. I think it must be yours, Kate.
Oh dear. Okay.
So let's go to yours where it says drivers of satisfaction, and it starts with communication and goes down to use of discretionary funds. And then
I'll just go to my own and talk, and then you can just move it along. So if we look at the satisfaction model, which everybody has seen, but I want to make sure that everybody knows how to interpret and look at this. You will set all the driver scores, which are the things in blue, the areas that we surveyed: communication, monitoring, training and technical assistance, linkages, etc. All of these scores went up from the previous year. And you will notice that we made a little change in the model. We delinked linkages and communication, so we now have separate scores and separate impacts. But you will see that the communication and monitoring and corrective action received the highest scores. Development of the state plan received the lowest scores. But in terms of impact, the things which will drive an increase in customer satisfaction, communication, monitoring, training and technical assistance, and linkages are kind of our big area to focus on. Okay, let's focus on linkages and communication, which is what we're looking at today. So let's look at the survey data for communication. This is 14. Jackie, you there?
Yep, we're here.
Okay. As I mentioned, this often up in every area, although we still have somewhat low-scoring areas. But communication now scores at a 74. Responsiveness of staff to requests is very high. Frequency of communication is good. Consistency of responses is good. Clarity is good. Where we want to focus a little bit is the sufficiency of information. There are some areas where eligible entities want more information, and some usefulness of feedback. You will note that state scores range from 26 to 99. There's broad range of scores in the communication area, which is why it's useful, I think, to focus on some best practices. Obviously, the states that you're hearing from today were the that scored, in the 90s. So they're clearly doing something that their eligible entities like. Next one. Here are some of the comments that eligible entities mentioned when we asked the question, what kinds of information, if any, would you like to receive that you are not now getting, which sort of speaks to that sufficiency issue. Eligible entities want more information, and you'll see they want more information on best practices. They want more information regarding the availability of other forms of grant opportunities, program-specific information. They want some regular communication and updates. You can read those yourself, but you'll see there were some very specific things that eligible entities. And out of the states, you received your individual report, so you should have some sense from those reports of kinds of information your particular eligible entities want. On linkages, next slide, Jackie, slide 16. Linkage also went up. As I mentioned, we delink this from communication, so we have a separate section on this, and it has an impact of 0.7. And scores range from 17 to 95. Again, a rather broad range. And there were a few areas, obviously all three areas, that score below the 70, which is kind of a mark I'd like to look at. So awareness of efforts. So some states may be doing something, but their eligible entities are not aware of the linkages they're doing. The sufficiency of linkages is an issue, and then the effectiveness of the partnerships. So this is an area where it may behoove us to do some more focusing. And on the next slide, these are some of the comments we got regarding linkages, what states are, or what the eligible entities are looking for. Information on linkages that the states have with other state agencies, more timely updates on state budget issues, timely responses to requests for information, information about linkages and activities at the state level that we can leverage. So there's a lot of, you can read those comments yourself, but it gives us a sense of the kinds of information eligible entities are looking for. To summarize the number of the suggestions, this is the next slide, Jackie. A number of the suggestions that were provided by survey respondents, the training, more information on best practices, monthly feedback, webinars on upcoming projects, etc. Many of these kinds of suggestions are already in place in the states who scored well in linkages and communication. And that's some of what you're going to hear about today. And it's a good way to introduce our state best practice work members who today are going to talk about what they are doing in terms of communication and linkages. And that's Bill Brand from Iowa, got South Dakota, Virginia, and Wisconsin. And we're going to start with Bill and talk about how they tackle these two issues. So let me turn it over to Bill, and then we'll hear from Kathleen Scoglin, Matt Fitzgerald, and Katie Kestern. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. Thanks very much. I want to say thanks to NASCAS for organizing this series of webinars. I think they're important and they're going to be useful to folks here in Iowa. We really looked at the customer satisfaction survey as a learning tool for us, as an action tool, and as a way to help us improve the way that we do our work. And so we tried to take the whole survey process in the spirit that I think it was intended, and that's to help us serve low-income families more effectively. And so I'm happy to talk about some things that we do here in Iowa. Look at the first slide, you get a little bit of a breakdown of who we are here in Iowa in terms of our CSBG office. We have 17 local agencies. They all happen to be private at this time. A small office with 2.5 FTEs. Very fortunate to be located as part of the Division of Community Action Agencies at the Iowa Department of Human Rights, which puts us in a position to administer CSBG, LIHEAP, weatherization, family development programs, two-generation initiatives, asset development efforts, and some other things that are all co-located in my agency, and I think that's a lot of advantages as well. I would just make one note. You can see on the slide there that by state law we're allowed 4% administrative funds and no discretionary funds, and I mention that just to say that anything I talk about today is what we do, not dependent on a large budget, let's just say. So I want to spend a few minutes on communication first. And if you want to go to that slide, thank you. Spend a few minutes focusing on the communication and relationships specifically with our eligible entities and state associations. I would contend that this relationship is the most important relationship that you have in your work, other than maybe your relationship with your boss, although I would also say that if you have a strong and productive, positive working relationship with your eligible entities in your state association, you're going to look good to your boss. So let's talk about leadership and communication with your eligible entities. I want to start with just a quick review of the NASCAS principles around monitoring. You may be familiar with these principles as the foundation for how we want to do our monitoring. I would expand those principles to say they're really principles that should guide our relationship in general with our partners. And they're not a secret, they're not rocket science. At the same time, they're not necessarily easy to live by either. But you can see them listed there. Those principles are open communication, mutual respect, and problem solving. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these. Each of them are vitally important. There is training that NASCAS does in detail about what these principles mean. But generally, open communication is just a matter of being there, being at the table, being accessible, being open and honest with your partners, and mutual respect is understanding each other's roles and knowing that they may be different roles, but with a shared goal. I tell my staff, myself, on a regular basis at my office that none of us know a local community action agency, but we know that it's extremely difficult and challenging work. We need to respect the fact that our local agencies know more about how they do their work than we do, and the same is true in reverse. We need to recognize and respect that. And joint problem solving, of course, is just working together when you have a challenge or a problem to be empowering to each other to help come up with better ways of doing business. So the bottom line is when you're guided by these principles, you create trust. And that's one of the measures of the survey is the level of trust that exists between your office and your eligible entities. When that trust is established, you can take on any other issue that comes before you. It's so important to lay that foundation so that when you need to, you can tackle the tough issues. When you don't have that trust, it's extremely difficult to be productive. It's extremely difficult to succeed truly in your work. That's why trust is a measure on this survey. It's really an indicator of how effective you can be in the work that you do on a day-to-day basis. Next, I want to spend a minute or two talking about is what I call the power of we. I tell a story quite often about when I first started my job, now 18-some years ago. There's probably a lot I can't remember at this point, but one thing I do remember well is the first meeting I had with my staff here and the first meeting I had with the Iowa Community Action Association Board of Directors. Both of those meetings, I used a number of times what I came to realize was something of a revelatory word to many people in the room at that time. The word was we. I used that word at that time because I believed I was coming in as part of a team, not just in my office, but in the Community Action Network in Iowa in general. We were all in it together, and we all had the same ultimate goal. Not necessarily just excited about coming to work for state government. I was excited to be a part of a movement, of a cause, to end poverty in our state. And if I could stress one thing to all my state office colleagues on this call today, it's realize that you are not an outsider looking in to the Community Action Network. You are part of the network. In fact, you're a critically important part of your state network. And how you do your job has a critical impact on how that network operates and how families living in poverty may fare in your state. Really see it as a team see it as a partnership. I really strongly believe that to be able to do the work we do in state CSBG offices is a huge privilege and a huge responsibility. And it's also a huge opportunity to make a difference in the lives of thousands and thousands of people. But the only way we can really have that impact is to figure out how to work effectively with our agencies and associations as part of a team. So the next thing I mentioned is just the value of being present. And as I said before, that means just being there and being at the table and being accessible to your partners. The state office is on the agenda at every association board meeting. We have updates at that time. We have open discussion for any issues that the directors want to talk about. We participate in many of the state association work groups. We have work groups that include our energy assistance directors, our CSBG planners, and Roma folks. Our weather station has a subgroup that we participate on. We work very closely on the association's conference planning committee to come up with training and technical assistance ideas, as well as just kind of ad hoc that the association puts together and they invite us to participate on that helps us all work together to take on issues. And it works both ways. We have work groups at our state office that we invite agencies and association staff to participate in as well. We have ongoing community needs assessment work groups, organizational standards work groups. We put work groups together for things like when we needed to revamp our CSBG formula and invite everybody to the table to get some people around the table to figure things out. So, you know, in doing so, you know, it just brings people in, it gets people's buy-in, results in better solutions. That give every time I have the chance to state office people is that you have a lot of smart people in your networks in your state. You have brilliant people, I would wager, in that network, and it just makes sense to tap into that expertise and those skills and that knowledge that exists in your network to help you do your work. So some people may ask, well, you know, where can I start with this? And relationships, you know, in every aspect can be tricky, and they're not always where we want them to be in our personal lives or our professional lives. But I think no matter where you are, there's a couple of simple ways to start. And one way is to look at the survey and to pick one of those areas there where you think that it would be important for you to look at how you could do your work better. You know, pick one of those areas. Put a work group together of your staff and association, local agency staff. Come up with a shared goal of what you want to move toward and come up with some strategies on what you want to try to improve on a certain aspect of your work. It will establish a relationship, will give you something concrete to work on. You know, I really suggest to folks, you know, go to NASCAS conferences where you can hear from other states where they've done this very thing, and we have a lot of success stories around the country, including states where the relationship was not necessarily that good or that strong between the state office and state association, where they picked a particular area to work on together, they tackled it, they had success with it, and it built a foundation for the next step for them. So that's one way to look at it. And the other thing I would say is just that when I first came into my job, I remember the executive director for the association and I sitting down together, and And one thing that he said to me that stuck with me was that he said, Bill, I'd like us to agree on one thing, and that we no surprises between us. That each have a job to do, but don't spring things on us without us seeing it coming. And you can do that. I pledge to do that. And we agreed to work together in that manner. And just that simple agreement to have surprises between us really got us a long way. And it's a good way to start. If that's where you need to start, it's very helpful. So all of it comes back to those guiding principles of open communication, mutual respect, and problem solving. So I'm going to move on just to spend a couple of minutes here on linkages, and particularly on linkages within state government between your office and other agencies that you may come in contact with. I think I want to focus on how CSBG can be the voice within state government. Be the CSBG voice within state government, and by doing so, you're going to have some of the greatest opportunities for impact on low-income families of any partnerships that you might be able to develop. And how to be that voice, really, I kind of just categorize them as institutional or formalized kinds of opportunities that you have to serve on committees and task forces within state government. Here in Iowa, we're very active in our Early Childhood Iowa initiative, which is a multi-state multi-state agency initiative involving many aspects of early childhood that we believe it's important for us to be at the table for those discussions and decision making. We serve on a state energy task force looking at energy policy for the state. I serve on a homelessness task force. There's a variety of those kinds of opportunities. WIOA is another one that it's important for us to be at the table. And sometimes, like we have to elbow our way to the table. And if that's what we need to do, that's what we do. These kind of linkages, time, but they're necessary because, we're small agencies. We tend to be small offices, and the only way we're going to have impact is through those kinds of partnerships. The kinds of opportunities that I have listed here are really those times when we can be looking for opportunities and keeping our eye out for the chances to participate in things we know are going to make a difference for the families that we serve. In Iowa, we've taken up a very strong two-generation initiative to look at how systems in our state can work better and result in better outcomes for the families that we serve. We have worked with the governor's office over the years in doing LIHEAP outreach efforts, doing public service announcements and press releases. When there are disasters in our state, floods, tornadoes, those kinds of things, I feel like part of my job is to make sure that I'm at the table at the state level. Saying community action needs to be involved, making sure that they're including our local agencies and doing whatever they can in those kinds of instances. Or even more simple ways. Iowa just hired a new director for the Department of Human Services, the DHS. In our state is sort of the big dog, the TANF agency. They have a big budget, administer a lot of programs. They hired a new director, myself and the association executive director and some local agency directors asked for a meeting with the new director at DHS to sit down with him, introduce ourselves, tell him who we are, what we do, and make sure that he's aware of the Community Action Network. So there's things and big things that you can do. But finally, I just want to say something about the power of a network. And what it means is, excuse me one second. What is, your office may be small, but you have something nobody else in state government has. You have a statewide network of local agencies that are governed by locally elected officials, low-income citizens, and private sector representatives. That's a lot of individuals and families across your state. And that work has power. It's not just your office, it's you as part of that team that can go to other agencies, can go to your governor's office, and talk about what contributions that you be making the effort against poverty in your state. So I think in the end, that's what it's all about, is working as part of that team to make a difference in the lives of people in your state. So I'm going to stop with that and turn it over to the next person. Thank you.
This is Kathy. Can you hear me?
Kathy, yes, we
Great.
can.
Okay, wonderful.
Ready.
All right. And just thank you, Bill. That was very, very helpful. I'm going to start with talking about CSBG in South Dakota. We have 4 community action agencies. They're all 14 to 20 counties. They're very large, multi-million-dollar companies and agencies. Certainly not all of those funds come through CSBG, but we're very respectful of the broad range, not only geographically but programmatically, that each covers. I'm the only person that works in CSBG, and I do this half-time. I do not do weatherization. There's another person within state government who manages that program, so I really focus my time on CSBG. Located in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Our state capital is Pierre, so I'm 227 miles away from the state capital, and some of the things that Bill talked about where he can, some relationships and some communication is more of an effort when you're looking at that kind of mileage and that kind of distance. But Pierre itself is a very small community. It's only 14,000 people. So the folks out there really know each other well, and they have a lot of relationships inside and outside of state government. I am currently located in the Department of Social Services under the Division of Economic Assistance. Our minimum budget state, $2.97 million for federal fiscal 17. I allocate 5% for administration, although typically we use closer to the 3.5%, and the dollars that remain in administration are just plugged back into the agencies at the same percentage that they ordinarily get. We do allocate, again, discretionary funds, but those are also added into the agency allocations, but we do designate that they spend those funds for emergency services. When ACSI was first, the 2015 outcomes came out. I met with all of the agency directors, and I did that individually to be able to talk about the individual agency, my relationship with that agency, what their priorities were related to the ACSI, and that was helpful to me, and I think it was helpful to them. I am part, as I said, of Department of Social Services, and we're a very large organization. I've listed some of the programs under the department: child protection, child care, child support, economic assistance, Medicaid, TANF, LEAP, weatherization, behavioral health. It's a huge organization, but each of those division directors meet regularly, and then the cabinet secretaries for all state government meet regularly. One of the important things that has come out of the relationships within government is the concept of no wrong door, and that is that any contact within state government should assist a consumer to get some help or direction or connection, And it's expected of us that when it's possible that we connect people, we don't just refer them. We find that in South Dakota there really isn't competition for consumers among the state entities or with the community action agencies. You know, if anything, we struggle to be able to meet needs. So work together as a team to bring in other organizations, to bring in other entities, to be able to meet people's needs is the way that we do business. The thing that we worked with that started probably, next slide please, we started working with the one-stop shop, one-stop goal. In about 2000, they began to co-locate as many state offices together as possible. In this building, for example, Department of Social Services, Department of Labor, Department of Voc Rehab, Disability Services. There's a whole variety of services located right here, and so consumers have the capacity and the opportunity to be able to access SNAP benefits and apply for TANF benefits and do their CHIP eligibility and maybe work with child support and those programs located within one building. And I think that's been that of a linkage opportunity for them has been important. And where that's not available, and it isn't in every community, there's the expectation that there will be coordination, assistance across programs, and that we would work in a very comprehensive manner. We also have staff in a number of programs that do outreach. So they go to some of the homeless shelters, some of the food sites, some of the mental health service sites, in-home services for families and adults. So that's important, and that's something that I've been able to bring to the Community Action Network is just all of those linkages and names of contact people and bringing those that communication with a number of those other programs to a higher level for the community action agencies as well. And the agencies within state government have been very helpful and enthused about developing better, more comprehensive relationships with the community action agencies. So the feedback from consumers generally is very positive. Consumers such as other agencies like Lutheran Social Services that does work with refugees, housing offices, Feeding South Dakota, Veteran Services, homeless programs, and community action agencies, I think are probably all working a little more effectively now than were in years past. And my focus really is sharing about linkages today. I think Bill again shared some really good communication ideas. I'll move on to Matt. Thank you so much.
Thank Kathy. All right, Matt Fitzgerald with Virginia.
Great, thank you. So, Kyle, if you want to go ahead and go next slide. So it is basically a medium-sized state. We have 31 agencies, 22 are private, 6 are public. We have 3 statewide organizations, and those organizations often have other community action agencies as grantees as well. So we have 4 designated CSPG staff, all, much like Kathy, located within the Department of Social Services for the state. I'm a division of Community Volunteer Services in the Office on Volunteerism and Community Services. So being a human services agency does in ways impact the ways that we work with agencies, I believe. We have about $10 million we receive a year. 5% of that is set aside for admin. Discretionary funds go to the 3 statewide organizations that I was talking about, so we don't receive any of those discretionary funds for training and technical assistance or anything like that, so most of that is done by our staff. So for those 31 agencies that we have 3 primary staff that are assigned to those agencies with a program we have called Assigned Agency Reps. 2 of our staff are primarily with the agencies and 1 statewide each. And then we have a staff person that works primarily with public agencies, and they also have 1 statewide assigned to them. So there's approximately, say, about 12 for each of the reps that have private agencies and 1 statewide, and then the individual that has the publics has about 6 to 7 agencies at a time. So I think probably the assigned agency reps is one of the key things that we've done over the last couple of years that has greatly impacted our positive communication with agencies. So it's a pretty simple concept. It's just basically that each agency has 1 staff person that is designated as their constant first contact. So anytime that a agency has any need, concern, question, that's what they're going to come to as their agency assigned rep. The assigned reps also conduct monthly calls with every agency. Say that this program, we've been doing it for about 2 years now. So we will go to times if it's really on sound footing and not a lot of questions, we will maybe have an email response into it bi-monthly. So, but it did start out as monthly calls, and agencies, we still do it that way. The important thing, though, is that each of those monthly contacts, whether it's email or phone, involves a very specific agenda, and there's a couple of repeat items on every meeting. So definitely org standards has been mandatory on every single conversation. So we talk about the training technical assistance plan we have with each agency on that call, and kind of go over what resources are and how we can help them with org standards. And also always catch up on where we are with invoicing, making sure that agencies are spending according to budget, and about where we are with processing, things like that. We have, for the specific agency reps, every piece of documentation that comes into our office for the agencies, so every quarterly report, any community action plan documents submitted in the application or annual community action plan process, anything needed regarding training, technical assistance, or ongoing activities at agencies, great stories, things like that. All of that comes through that agency rep. So the agency rep gets to know everything that's going on in the agency, but they also, because of their knowledge, are able to answer questions inside of our office whenever we have requests for things that are going on. We have to do a weekly report that goes to the governor, so that agency rep is able to provide that type of information for the agency. We also, because you have that constant contact with the rep, when you get ready for a monitoring, you have discussed pretty much everything that's going on in your agency for the entire year. So as preparations come up for the monitoring, it's very easy to kind of transition into that we need from you in advance, what the monitoring is going to look like, and I think it's made it so we've been able to lessen some of the time involved in actual pieces of monitoring. I also have, because agencies are constantly funneling information to us, we're able to get to a lot more events. But also our commissioner goes to events, directors of the office, so we're able to, because we have notice, get a lot of the higher-ups in the agency to be able to go to things. So one of the other things about the contact is that agencies know for sure that they have that designated time. They know if they're worried about questions that they might have, that they know they're going to have that time to ask the questions. So we don't get quite as much back and forth about different things that answered at that one time. So I think that's been appreciated, and it's been time spent wisely. Okay, if you can go next one. So out of agency reps, a couple of other things we've done to make communication better. We do a newsletter, and that's become, we used to send tons of emails. We send them regularly to all the agency staff. So the monthly newsletter, everyone knows that everything we have coming out on funding or deadlines, things specifically that our office is doing, planning, going to come out in that newsletter. So everyone knows to expect that, to read that, and it's cut down on a lot of the cross problems where we're missing when we've requested something or let somebody know something was coming. Now that you know that you must look at that newsletter if you want to get the good information, it's really helped us a lot. We've also been able to put into that, so we put in like policy updates, the office is thinking about for the future. We also include a lot of technical assistance training links that we've come across over the at least within a month. And that too because in the past it had been just kind of send it out whenever you get something, and that to a bunch of people has been a problem, so now everybody can consolidate on those technical assistance training links. So it helped us a lot because the agency stories and events and things that are going on in the network that have been related to us to then put those into our newsletter as well. And then the piece is that the association regularly sends us information. Take that information and share it in the network as well, and kind of show some of the collaboration between us and the state association. So that's a piece for us as well. The thing that we've done that I think has helped a lot on the training side and communicates some of the specific elements that we're trying to get across on processes like needs assessment, strategic planning. We instituted monthly webinars, but they're very short. They're like usually 15 minutes, and they're recorded. So we can take a very specific piece out of a needs assessment, like maybe how to conduct a key informant interview or something very specific that we need information on, do a quick 10-minute webinar. And it, timing-wise, but it also is kind of a continuous learning instead of a bunch at one specific time. So that's been productive, and we use folks from the agencies to conduct some of those webinars as well. The other piece, we have had a website for the agency, but that one is it's certain types of information you can put on it, and it's very hard to update and keep relevant. We now have a website that's with a partner nonprofit, really, that has a lot of our more specific types of training resources, and I think we've gathered templates, useful information for agencies, I think. And so it's not our regular public-facing, it's one tied directly to our agency. So we're able to update it quickly. We're also able to have some back-end information where there's password-protected areas that we can use for our, much Bill was mentioning, we have a lot of peer groups and task forces that are in cooperation with us. We're set up on those, on that website, areas where people can communicate and share documents and things like that. So that's been very helpful also. Talked about the monthly calls. Mainly, that is an area where we can share a lot of information and know that we're updated. We still have regular emails that we send. We try to keep them more to the lemo style, specific to you need to know. We have very specific distribution lists. So ED, finance, and then staff or planning staff. Those emails are broken up into those kind of categories, and we only send out mass to everyone if it's kind of between time in our newsletters and we think it's something we have to send out. We've done in the last year and a half that's been really successful are roundtables. So we always attend every state association meeting. We have at each one of those 4 meetings a session about an hour long at each one that basically I go there and talk about our upcoming office priorities. Things have been brought by different agencies throughout the period since the last roundtable. Kind of burn questions and things that need to be thought about, discussed, and very open. Agencies provide feedback. They ask other questions that we need to think about in the interim, or like provide us thoughts if we're getting ready to come to decision. It gives input, but it also keeps everybody aware of kind of what our agency's thinking about. so that when you come to a period where we might have a comment period or ask for a task force or do something specific where we're going to seek any input, they already knew it was coming and has kind of been thinking about it. So that's been, I think, pretty successful. Okay, so a couple of other quick things that we do regularly. We always attend at least one board meeting every year for every agency, sometimes often that, but definitely at least one. We already mentioned the roundtables. We also go to other events held by agencies so that we can either or be just participate in specific activities that they're having and kind of get our face out there as we're interested and proud of the work they're doing, to be honest. We not only go out to agencies so we can train, I guess this is the thing that I talk about a lot. We'll go there if somebody's getting ready to start a needs assessment process or a strategic planning process. We'll go out there and have a conversation with the board about kind of what the expectations are or what we've seen, so it gets that process started with some level of knowing what expectations are and giving them an opportunity to what we're going to be looking at when we come back to assess how they did with it. You can go. This piece, there's a few things that we do. We present at several other conferences throughout the year. We've presented on housing, economic development, health conferences in the last 2 years. That puts us in front of our agencies are still at those, but also other agencies that are partners to ours in the community. And so we will talk about things going on in the community action world. And especially, I'll give you a specific example. We've gone to talk about our needs assessment process at Planning District Commission conference. At planning districts in our state often are involved in planning kind of on a regional basis. So that created a lot of cross-conversation between those PDCs and our agencies about ways that they could share information and work together on needs assessment type opportunities. We also, our conferences bring in agencies. So we recently had a conference in coordination with the State Association, and we brought in the Virginia Housing Development Authority to come in and talk about a capacity building grant that they had available that several of our agencies have since applied for and a few have received. So that's a way to talk about opportunities, but also the VA, when they attended the conference, they sat in on a couple of our other sessions where we talked about what these were working on for that year, and I think it helped them to also understand what they were seeing when the applications came in, so that was helpful. We have a very solid relationship with the state housing community development entity, and has led to a lot of coordination. So we're over CSBG, they're over the CDBG. So we've had opportunity to coordinate on planning initiatives and conversations around funding opportunities related to both of our programs that have full. And then a couple of specific is I'll give you. We have this state 2-in-1, so the referral service, information referral service is run from our agency. That specific service often includes information from agencies that we work with on not always constant things, like, for example, EITC once a year, free tax prep that's run by many of our community action agencies, and we put from our office the EITC credit specifically, but we also work to ensure that through 211, those agencies' services for free tax prep are found by anyone that needs them. Another very specific linkage is we worked with our extension service in the state to put on a facilitation training for the individuals that do needs assessment. So one example of training, we've had a couple of others. Those few of the examples. I have a couple of others there with anybody that has interest, domestic violence task force, things like that. Leave that in case there's other questions.
Okay, terrific. Thank you, Matt. And we're going to go on now with Katie Castern from Wisconsin, who's going to be talking about communication.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you so much, and thanks for participating. I'm also down ideas from other states. There's a lot of great stuff going on. So next slide, please. Okay. So Wisconsin, we've got 16 community action agencies and 2 purpose agencies that work statewide, and all are nonprofits, no public entities. Our staffing's pretty small. It's really just me, and then my supervisor charges a small amount to the CSBG, but not staffing there. We're located within our Department of Children and Families, Division of Family and Economic Security, which operates TANF for state. And so we have our TANF Public Assistance Program, which is called Wisconsin Works, and also the Bureau of Child Support, the other half. So CSBG is add-on, kind of a oddity actually within TANF program or office that runs TANF. So there's some challenges with that, with linkages. Our allocation right now is approximately $8.6 million. For admin costs, we're at just a little bit over 3% for admin, and our discretionary, we do have 4% discretionary funds that all go to the 11 federally recognized tribal governments in the state who sometime in the past switched from getting their CSBG dollars directly from the federal government through a pass-through with the state discretionary dollars. Next, please. Communication is something we scored very high on the ACSI on communication, and I'm going to share our practices, which are all, to my mind, quite common sense type things. I send out weekly emails a week, to be honest. If the NASCAS is just updates are not something that would have been interest, but they typically hold something that the agencies would like. But occasionally they're really just for state offices. But I'll send out emails with the updates and then links to any articles of, especially if any other of their peer community action agencies are in the news, and any training opportunities or funding opportunities that I hear about. Our state legislative and budget updates. So I'll send them things when our state's going through its budget process, send them some updates, which they actually really appreciate because even publicly available information, difficult to make the time to look for it. So having an easy link with the summary as things going on, I think it helps. And I'm able to get that. We have a big policy department that tracks the state budget process and summarizing it for our leadership. So I'll just borrow that and send it out to our agencies. And really good feedback on that, so they feel like they're hearing a lot better about what's going on in the state capitol. Next, please. There's a communication practice I have instituted that they like, I've gotten good feedback on, and that is making sure that I'm not rarely communicate just with executive directors. So my email distribution list includes at least 2 people at each agency, sometimes more, down a few levels. The agency executive directors are so busy, they not have time typically to read a lot of things and information in order to really get into to the people that need it. You've got to find that next set associate director, planning, the planners. I always want to include whoever it is who does the data reporting, who's responsible for the IS survey and now the CSE annual report. Those kind of people should be, I always try as inclusive as possible. And then very responsive to ACs. I try to make sure if somebody's asking me ask a question or by email or phone that I get back to them. Try to get back to them within the working day. Big activity that they really appreciate and had voice being important is getting monitoring reports back to them after they have CSB on-site monitoring visit. Getting back to them within 30 days or has really helped them because that's good to have a monitoring visit and then, radio silence and you're not sure how it goes by and you haven't heard. So we have set the goal that they must get their monitoring reports from us within 30 days. Next. And other folks, and we do the same thing with our state association meets 3 times a year. And I always attend those and give an update. I usually have 45 minutes to an hour on the agenda. And I meet with, it's just the executive directors, so it's comprise the board of our state association. So I'll give them an update. I always go over any news from the state level that, they always like to hear about staffing updates, management changes. I go the timeline for the year and give them a handout, too, of that for all due dates. I with a tentative monitoring schedule so they can see who's up next. And we'll have an open discussion about just different things of interest. Sometimes they have questions for me that they need to address for the group. It's a very group to have a kind of be able to talk. It's really any topic can be brought up. So it can be ranging discussion. And then I also always try to give them updates on things like the organizational standards assessment and talk about how in general trends I'm seeing with organizational standards or any things I'm seeing in terms of improvements and trends when I'm doing monitoring or things that are common challenges across the agencies. And then one thing I always do with these meetings, because I'm only meeting with the executive directors and they don't want other than their immediate board, it's our state association board in the room. Else I give to the executive directors like that annual timeline, updates I give together notes and I send that out to everybody so that in the room it's those people 1 or 2 levels down in each agency will get the same information. I mean, maybe some of the things, not private conversations, there might be things that aren't appropriate to be shared with them, but, there's my general updates and information that would be helpful. I make out to everybody after each state association meeting. Let's see. Recent improvement. I've been trying to use giving updates using, we have Adobe Connect here in our office. It's very easy to use to give information where we can go through things that so I don't have to wait for a state association meeting or schedule events. Travel is just tough. Everybody's got, the time and money for travel is difficult. So webinars are becoming increasingly popular. Next, how many more slides I have? Go ahead. Next, please. And I want to add, just as we're wrapping up too, we do having one just have me really. I don't have time to attend many agency functions. I would, but I do Roma board training. That I think considered part of communication because it gives me a chance to meet the agency's board members and go over with them. I also go over some basic information about CSBG, what DCF's role and my office's role is, and then try to give them some updates about what's going on with the organizational standards or any other things that are going on nationally so that the board members are a bit connected as well. And that is it.
Okay, terrific. Perfect. Thank you, Katie. All right. So, Kyle, are you there, and are you able to unmute everybody so we can have a discussion and get some questions?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So Kyle works on that. Here is on your screen contact information for the state representatives who just spoke today. So there's phone numbers and email addresses. So if you don't already have those, they're here for you. So I think Matt has invited you to reach out to him, and I know all the other state office folks do as well. So if you have a particular question about what someone talked about and you want to follow up with that specifically, then feel free to contact any one of them. So does anyone have any questions?
Comments or observations or thoughts that people have based on what they heard?
I do have a question, Katie. I did have a question. I thought it was interesting that you commented that you share information with one of your community action agencies is in the news with the network. So do you in your office do research on that so you know when an agency has been in the news, or do you hear about it from the agency itself, or what is that process that you use to spread the news?
I don't do a lot of in-depth searching, but often agencies will send me something, or it'll pop up on another numery that I'm subscribed to for state government. Mm-hmm. Sometimes local news will be included on these news summaries.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, this is Deetsa from Massachusetts. How's everyone?
Good.
I had a question relative to linkages, especially with other state agencies. In that, how those of you who are able or have been able to reach out to other state agencies that are outside of your particular agency, how did you go about it? How was it set up? Was it done in conjunction with your state association? Was there any kind of questions or expected topics? I guess because, we score very low and we're looking to bring that up.
Question. Who wants to start with that?
Well, this is Kathy, and I'll just start, and I'm sure someone else will chime in, but if the agencies has a connection with that organization through one of their other funding sources, be it extension or food services or housing or whatever, we have used those agencies to be a source of connection and a way for the others to have opportunity to get contact names or even hear webinar information from them.
This is Matt, and I only hesitated because it probably doesn't sound very sophisticated. So we have basically our director and a few others have working relationships with someone at almost every agency. It might not be the right person, but it's always someone, and we're on so many different task forces that basically we just take the opportunities to work with the individuals that we do know there to identify, specific areas where something comes up, who we should talk to, and I guess just a warm handoff mentality. It worked pretty well, but we also, I think because we present at specific conferences, presentation at other agency conferences has helped us much sure I can't hear.
Yeah, excuse me. Remember that everyone needs to mute your phone if you're not speaking. Okay, Matt, why don't you continue?
Okay. So I think it's basically having some into the agency and then finding the proper person to talk to is what I was getting at, I guess. But there's no real specific great magical piece, I don't think. Sorry.
You bring, with your relationships to any of the presenters, have you brought any of your those other state agencies to the network so that the network at large has an opportunity to engage or speak? Or
Yeah, absolutely. So that my best example recently was that I mentioned the Department of Housing and Community Development, so they have their community development type grants or economic development type grants. So at a recent conference, we had someone that was in their planning area around planning development come in and talk about the ways that what kind of information a community would have to submit to get a grant that could lead to a possible project. So that helped our agencies to understand who in their community they need to talk to about, put together something like that, because it involves need assessment information, which our agencies have, but what they don't a lot of times is the connections to the business piece or the economic development piece. So that's an example. We often have other state agencies come talk about, especially funding opportunities, but ongoing initiatives that may impact our agencies. Yes.
Thank you.
Sure, thanks.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments? Okay, while you are thinking of a question or something else that you're interested in, then let me take you to this slide, which tells us the next best practices webinar. So you would have already received the link for the one next Tuesday, the 19th, which I believe is a Tuesday, and that focuses on monitoring and corrective action. And then we will be sending you out another email soon with the development of the state plan. You can see the date there and training and technical assistance, that date and those times. So we'll be sending you out an email with the webinar links for those. And then our final one is going to be the use of discretionary funds and the distribution of funds we're combining into one webinar. That will be the last one we do, and we are looking at that last week in January. So when you get the next email, you should have all the dates and times and webinar links, so you will be able to sign up for all of them upcoming. Okay, anything else anybody thought of? Any questions? Okay, Kate, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
No, I was hopeful that what I heard was so many is both in terms of the quality and the quantity of the communication and linkages and the depth of the work that these states, both large and small, have done, that hopefully Eddie can get one idea, one inspiration. Doesn't have to be exactly as any of these states have done, but something that he implemented all of the states. So other than no, I'm looking forward to the next webinars.
All right. Yeah, I agree, and I know we had Katie mention that she was writing down ideas that she heard from the other states. So absolutely, Might be something that you don't do exactly the way you heard, but that fits into your state processes in a different way. But remember, if you have specific questions about any of the approaches and examples that were used, then please reach out to the state office person to connect with them for more information. We thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next Tuesday, December 19th at 3 o'clock, and let us know if you have any questions. Thank you.